They're now blocking the flow of people and goods from the UK in an attempt to avoid a new and more contagious strain of coronavirus. And scientists are racing to understand how this new strain emerged and the scope of its threat. Let's explore this issue now with Dr. Raywat Deonandan, who is back with us, epidemiologist and associate professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences, University of Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning.
How often do viruses mutate?
Oh, of all the questions I thought you would start with, this is not the one I thought you would start.
Okay.
It depends on the virus. The COVID virus, the SARS-CoV-2 is an RNA virus, influenza, a DNA virus. It matters. Different genetic strands are more vulnerable than others. So it really does matter a lot. And also it depends on the opportunities for mutation. So that's the number of people who are infected, number of versions of the virus running around, and the number of opportunities it has to interact with other species. So it's really, really varied.
Okay. What question did you think I was going to start with?
I thought you thought, should we be worried?
Should we be worried? Should we be worried?
I think it's way too early the big question is, will the vaccines work on this new variant? And every sign so far points to yes, because 99% of the proteins on the surface of the virus have not changed. And the vaccines produce an antibody response that binds to multiple portions of the virus. And so as long as they can bind somewhere, the vaccines are going to work. Now, we'll know for sure in a couple of weeks because, of course, the vaccine manufacturers are investigating this with incredible amounts of vigor. But I have every expectation the vaccines will work. More importantly, let's say a mutation does occur that changes the surface of the virus such that the vaccines are less effective. The new mRNA vaccine technologies can produce a brand new vaccine in 48 hours now.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, so that means we've just got to retask the manufacturing to create a new recombinant version.
Okay. We see the banning of flights by dozens of countries, as I mentioned, but in all honesty, what are the chances that it's already here in Canada?
I think it probably is already here, to be honest. I mean, I have no evidence for that, but I would not be surprised given the nature of international travel and the laxity in which the world has fallen behind in controlling that travel. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of cases here already.
Okay. It's more infectious, but it appears as though that doesn't necessarily mean it's more severe or deadly. Fair enough?
That's right. And really,
Okay.
It's not even clear that it's more infectious. It's just that
Okay.
It seems to
All
be
right.
the dominant strain in some parts of England, and it's being found in those places where the disease is exploding. So the conclusion is it probably is more transmissible, but that's still being investigated now. It seems likely. It seems likely that some mutation has happened on the surface that's allowing it better entrance into the cell, and that's creating a greater infectivity. But there's no evidence that it's more lethal. What does that even mean? Does that mean once you're infected, you're more likely to be killed? There's no evidence for that yet.
Well, it would be interesting to know, for example, COVID-19 certainly has a more potent effect on the elderly and those with chronic underlying conditions, right? So
Yeah,
if
exactly.
if it mutates, would it make it more deadly to other demographics, for example?
Right. So
Yeah.
that's a really good question. And that's what I was getting at when I say, what do we mean by more lethal? An average person getting it, probably the same probability of death as you would for the previous version. But the fact that it is likely more transmissible means it's more likely to get into the more vulnerable demographics, therefore at a population level may produce more death. So in that sense, it's more lethal. We don't know if it's going to be more transmissible in the young, for example, which is really a big question, because if it turns out that this strain runs wild amongst children more so than the previous strain, then suddenly the schools are even more at risk as hotbeds of transmission. These are big questions we don't know the answers yet to, but they're answerable questions.
Okay. Could it be, and this is just a question from a layperson, okay? Could it be an indicator that maybe this is seasonal in some ways? Because my understanding is influenza is seasonal and it changes every year, and the flu shot is different every year, for example.
Yeah, but that seasonality has a lot to do with the origins of the interaction. So influenza opportunities for mutation are in places that are densely populated with close association with animals, like in East Asia, where we have the wet markets and pigs and ducks and things in close proximity. That doesn't seem to be the case here. It seems more like we hit a critical mass of infections, and that allowed the natural mutations to occur at a given rate. And at some point, a beneficial mutation occurred from the virus's perspective. So I don't see any evidence of seasonality in that sense yet. But who knows? What do I know? All these things are evolving in real time.
Sure. So, given what do you want to know? Like, what's most pressing for you right now?
Most pressing to me is, of course, can we be absolutely 100% sure the vaccine is just as effective? I think it probably is.
Right. Okay.
Number two, the transmission rates. Is it exactly how much more transmissible is it, if indeed it is more transmissible, and in which demographics? Number three is where exactly is it? And number four, does it have any other downstream biological effects that are different from the first version? Likely not. But these are questions we need to know the answers to.
Let's say I went for a PCR test. Would that test be able to determine if I have this strain or the other strain? Or
excellent questions. You ask such good questions.
Oh, I appreciate that.
The PCR tests focus on the genetic signal of the virus, and the standard is a 3-gene PCR test. So we look at different targets on the gene, and right now they are able to detect all of the available mutations that I know of. It's now the standard PCR test probably cannot tell which version you have, so we have to do deeper investigation, surveillance testing of the population. So I think in the UK they've looked at 10% of the positive cases to do a sample of how many are this new strain. So they do a deeper investigation. They sequence the genome of the entire virus of those 10%. So it's boring science stuff. But again, this is the 100% focus of so many geneticists right now. So we'll get answers soon.
Okay. As I'm sure you're aware, being from living in the Ottawa area, there's a raging debate now about the lockdown. We had 19 confirmed lab cases of COVID-19 for Ottawa today versus 636 in Toronto and more than 2,000 province-wide. And a lot of people think, we don't deserve to be in a lockdown for 28 days, given how well we've done here in the capital. What's your opinion, Doctor?
Yeah, to be honest, I was a little surprised to hear it's a province-wide approach. So let's look at it from a variety of perspectives. Yes, we have done well, and we should be congratulated, and maybe we should be allowed to have a little more freedom. On the other hand, our reproduction number has crept above 1 in the last couple of days, so we are looking at exponential growth again. And our wastewater is showing the same thing. It's creeping upwards again. So we are definitely on the upward trend once again. So we probably are due for some kind of public health intervention. Maybe it's sufficient to tell people in more strong language, things are looking bad, be circumspect about this. So I'm not overly surprised that given those signals, we're taking a more heavy-handed approach. I'm more surprised around the greener areas of the province, the northern portions that are a little more untouched, that they're going through, I think, a 2-week lockdown. I'm more surprised by that. I mean, at least for Ottawa, we're adjacent to the hot zone of Quebec, so we're always at risk. I don't want to second-guess our decision makers too much about this, because they have a deeper dive into the modeling data than I've seen. But something needs to be done. Absolutely. We're in dire crisis mode in the province if you average out the cases, even though most of that is in the southern cities. And also, there's going to be bleed over from the red zones into the orange zones into the green zones. So unless we can control the traffic of people moving in between those zones, I can see there is an argument for a broad brush approach. But I agree. I think Ottawa in particular deserves a little bit of leeway. And maybe we'll be looking, I mean the province will be looking at lifting the restrictions in Ottawa earlier if in fact we maintain that good behavior.
Okay. Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on our program, sir. Thank you again,
Thank
Doctor.
you.
Yeah, bye-bye.